The deep space exploration vessel HSS Endeavour drifted through the void between star systems like a metal whale, hunting for something interesting. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair watching the stars crawl by on the main screen. 3 months into their survey mission, and they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. The crew was getting restless, and Jake could not blame them. Space exploration sounded exciting until you realized that space was mostly empty and boring. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes looked up from her communications station with a puzzled expression on her face. She had been the ship's xenolinguist for 5 years now, and Jake had never seen her look confused about anything involving alien languages. Lisa could speak 47 different alien tongues and read ancient scripts that made archaeologists weep with joy. If something was confusing her, then it was either very new or very bad. "Captain," Lisa said slowly, "I'm getting something strange on the long-range communications array." Jake turned his chair toward her. The bridge was quiet except for the usual hum of the ship's engines and the soft beeping of various monitoring systems. His tactical officer, Commander Rick Stone, was playing some kind of strategy game on his console and trying to look like he was working. Chief Engineer Bobby Chen was probably down in engineering, making the fusion reactor run better than the manufacturer said it could. "Strange how?" Jake asked. Lisa frowned at her screen and adjusted several controls. "It's a transmission, but it's broadcasting on every frequency at once. Emergency channels, diplomatic channels, even the old radio frequencies that nobody uses anymore. And Captain?" She paused and looked directly at him. "It's written in over 300 alien languages, simultaneously." That got Rick's attention. The tactical officer minimized his game and turned to face Lisa. 300 languages at once. That's not possible. The processing power alone would require a computer the size of a space station. "That's what I thought too," Lisa replied. "But the signal is clean and perfectly synchronized across all frequencies. Whoever sent this has technology we can't even comprehend." Jake felt a cold sensation in his stomach. In his 20 years of space service, he had learned that impossible things usually meant trouble was coming. "Can you translate it?" Lisa was already working on her translation matrix. Her fingers flew across the controls as she fed the signal through every linguistic database the ship carried. "It's going to take some time, Captain. Some of these languages are ancient. I'm seeing Tamilian high script, which hasn't been used in 50,000 years, and something that looks like early Karathi battle cant." "How long?" Jake asked. "Give me 30 minutes for a rough translation. Maybe 2 hours for something detailed." Jake nodded and activated the ship's intercom. "All senior staff to the bridge immediately. We have a situation." Chief Engineer Bobby Chen arrived first because he had been expecting something like this to happen. Bobby was one of those engineers who believed that interesting problems always found you when you were trying to have a quiet day. He was followed by Dr. Susan Parker, the ship's medical officer, and Colonel Amy Wright, who commanded the small marine detachment that every exploration vessel carried. "What's the situation, Captain?" Colonel Wright asked as she took her position near the tactical station. "We've received what appears to be a galaxy-wide transmission in over 300 alien languages," Jake explained. "Lisa is working on translating it, but early indications suggest it's some kind of emergency broadcast." Dr. Parker raised an eyebrow. "Galaxy-wide? That would require transmitters on thousands of worlds, all broadcasting simultaneously. Or one transmitter powerful enough to reach every inhabited system in the galaxy," Bobby added, "which would require more energy than most stars produce in a year." Lisa suddenly looked up from her console with an expression Jake had never seen before. She looked terrified. "Captain, I have a preliminary translation of the core message. Let's hear it." Lisa took a deep breath and read from her screen. "To all spacefaring civilizations of the galaxy, the devourers have awakened. Our fleets are broken. Our worlds burn. We have exhausted all conventional responses. This is a call for aid from the Galactic Council to any civilization capable of interstellar travel. Please help us." The bridge went silent, Jake had heard of the Galactic Council, of course. Every human in space had heard stories about the great alliance of alien civilizations that had been governing the galaxy for millions of years. Humanity had never been invited to join because they were too young and too violent, according to the few aliens who bothered to talk to human diplomats. The Devourers, Rick said quietly. I've heard that name before. Ancient machine race, Dr. Parker confirmed. Supposedly went dormant millions of years ago after consuming half the galaxy. Most xenoarchaeologists think they're just a myth. Lisa was still working on her translation. There's more, Captain. Much more. They're providing tactical data, fleet positions, casualty reports. Her voice got quieter with each word. Captain, according to this message, they've already lost over 200 billion beings across 12-star systems, Colonel Wright whistled low. 200 billion. It gets worse, Lisa continued. The message includes battle footage. Captain, the Galactic Council has been fighting these things for 6 months and losing badly. Their most advanced weapons are useless. Their most brilliant tactics are failing. Jake stood up and walked to the main screen where the stars continued their slow dance across the void. How bad is it, Lisa? According to the data, the Devourers are self-replicating machines that consume matter to build more of themselves. They adapt to any weapon used against them within minutes. Every time the Council thinks they've found a weakness, the Devourers evolve a countermeasure. Bobby Chen shook his head. Self-replicating machines that adapt. That's every engineer's nightmare. The Council is requesting aid from any civilization with interstellar capability, Lisa read. They're not being picky about who responds. The message specifically says that all previous diplomatic considerations are suspended for the duration of the emergency. Rick laughed, but there was no humor in it. They ignored us for 3 centuries because we were too primitive and violent. Now they want our help. Jake turned back to his crew. These were good people who had volunteered for deep space exploration because they wanted to see what was out there beyond human space. Now they were being asked to fly toward the most dangerous threat the galaxy had ever seen. Lisa, how long would it take us to reach the nearest Council rendezvous point? Lisa consulted her navigation computer. At maximum burn, about 3 weeks, Captain. And how long before these Devourers reach human space if they keep expanding at their current rate? Lisa worked through the calculations. If their expansion rate remains constant, maybe 18 months. If it accelerates, she paused. Less than a year. Jake looked at each member of his senior staff. Opinions, Colonel Wright spoke first. Captain, we're one exploration ship with a crew of 300. What can we possibly do against something that's destroying civilizations millions of years older than ours? Maybe nothing, Jake admitted. But if we don't try and these things reach human space, then everything we know and everyone we care about dies anyway. Dr. Parker nodded. The captain's right. Even if we can't help much, at least we'll have tried. Bobby Chen was studying the technical data Lisa had extracted from the message. Captain, I'm seeing something interesting here. The Council's been using energy weapons, exclusively. Plasma cannons, particle beams, antimatter projectors, all very sophisticated. So what if sophisticated isn't what we need? Jake felt something click in his mind. Set course for the Council rendezvous point. Maximum burn. Aye, Captain, Rick replied, and began entering coordinates as the HSS Endeavor changed course toward the unknown. Jake Morrison made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Humanity was going to war whether they were ready or not. 3 weeks of hard burn through hyperspace brought the HSS Endeavor to a site that took Jake Morrison's breath away. The diplomatic station Harmony hung in space like a mechanical moon with towers and docking bays stretching in every direction. Jake had seen pictures of Council architecture before, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. The station was easily 50 times larger than Earth's biggest space habitat, and it glowed with energy signatures his ship's sensors could barely identify. Captain, Rick Stone said from his tactical station, I'm reading over 8,000 ships in the area. Energy signatures from at least 40 different species. Lisa Hayes was monitoring the communications traffic and shaking her head in amazement. I'm picking up diplomatic chatter in languages I've never heard before. Some of these civilizations predate human evolution by millions of years. The docking controller's voice came through the speakers in accented but understandable English. Human vessel HSS Endeavour. You are cleared for docking bay 774. Please follow the guidance beacons and maintain minimum thrust. Jake guided his ship through the maze of alien vessels toward their assigned berth. He saw sleek Timelian, cruisers that looked like works of art, and massive Karathi battleships bristling with weapon systems he could not identify. Everything looked elegant and sophisticated and utterly alien. The Endeavour, with its blocky human design and primitive fusion drive, looked like a tool shed compared to sports cars. Nervous, Captain? Colonel Amy Wright asked as she joined Jake on the bridge, terrified. Jake admitted, We're about to meet with civilizations that were building star empires when humans were still living in caves. After docking, they were escorted through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The station's interior was even more impressive than its exterior. Gravity plates kept them oriented, while beings of dozens of different species moved through the halls with practiced efficiency. Jake saw creatures that floated instead of walking and others that seemed to be made of living metal. The escort was a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms who introduced himself as Diplomatic Aide Rentar. The Emergency Council is meeting in Assembly Hall Prime, Rentar explained as they walked. Representatives from over 150 species are present. This is the largest gathering in Council history. How bad is the situation? Dr. Susan Parker asked. Rentar's expression darkened. 17 star systems have been consumed. The Devourers grow stronger with each world they take. Our finest military minds are baffled. The assembly hall was a massive chamber with seating arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. Jake estimated it could hold 10,000 beings, and it was nearly full. The air hummed with translation devices, as hundreds of different languages were converted into something approaching universal understanding. Jake and his small team were shown to seats in what was obviously the section reserved for minor civilizations. Ambassador Veltar of the Timelian hegemony was speaking when they arrived. The Timelians were an ancient race known for their mastery of energy manipulation and their barely concealed contempt for younger species. Veltar was a tall, elegant being whose skin seemed to glow with internal light. The situation continues to deteriorate, Veltar was saying. Our most powerful antimatter cannons barely scratch their hulls. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can modify them. Admiral Korthak of the Zalani military spoke next. The Zalani were a warrior race that had been perfecting combat for 50 million years. If they were admitting defeat, then the situation was truly desperate. We attempted a coordinated assault on their main fleet with 5,000 ships. Korthak's voice was bitter. We destroyed exactly 0 enemy vessels while losing 800 of our own. Jake listened as representative after representative described failed battles and useless weapons. The pattern was always the same. The Council would attack with their most advanced energy weapons, and the Devourers would adapt within minutes. Plasma beams that had destroyed planets became harmless light shows. Particle cannons that could crack moons were shrugged off like gentle rain. The enemy learns faster than we can innovate, admitted science coordinator Thelmar of the Ancient. Korthak Collective. Their machine intelligence processes our tactics and develops counters in real time. Every battle makes them stronger. Finally, Ambassador Veltar noticed the human delegation. I see we have representatives from the human territories. His tone made it clear what he thought of that development. While we appreciate any gesture of support, I fear your primitive technology would be of little use against foes that have defeated our most advanced systems. Colonel Wright started to stand, but Jake put a hand on her arm. Getting angry would not help their case. Instead, Jake stood and addressed the assembly. Ambassador Veltar, we understand that human technology is less sophisticated than yours. We would like to request detailed specifications on Devourer hull, composition, and defensive systems. Veltar's expression showed mild amusement. Certainly, though I fail to see what insights your kinetic projectile weapons could provide against enemies that have withstood antimatter bombardment. The technical briefing that followed was both enlightening and terrifying. The Devourers were more advanced than humanity's worst nightmares. Their hulls were composed of a metamaterial that could redistribute energy damage instantly. Their shields adapted to incoming weapon signatures within minutes. Their manufacturing capabilities allowed them to replace losses faster than the Council could inflict damage. Their adaptive protocols are frighteningly efficient, explained technical analyst Mordan, as holographic displays showed battle footage. Observe how their hull configuration changes in response to particle beam impact. Jake watched the recorded battle with growing interest. Council ships fired elegant beams of pure energy at Devourer vessels. The first few shots caused visible damage, but within minutes the same weapons were having no effect at all. The enemy hulls seemed to learn and adapt in real time. What about kinetic weapons? Jake asked. Simple projectiles moving at high velocity? Mordan looked puzzled. Kinetic weapons. You mean solid projectiles. We abandoned such primitive concepts millions of years ago in favor of energy-based systems. But have you tested kinetic weapons against Devourer defenses? There would be no point, Veltar interrupted. If antimatter cannot penetrate their defenses, then simple projectiles certainly cannot. Jake exchanged glances with his team. Bobby Chen was looking at the technical specifications with the expression of an engineer who had just spotted an obvious flaw that everyone else had missed. Rick Stone was studying the tactical data with the focus of a military officer seeing new possibilities. We would like copies of all technical data regarding Devourer capabilities, Jake said. Of course, Mordan replied. Though, again, I must ask what you hope to accomplish. Maybe nothing, Jake admitted, but sometimes a fresh perspective helps. The meeting continued for hours with increasingly desperate reports from the front lines. 3 more systems had been attacked in the past week. Refugee fleets were streaming toward the Galactic Rim, carrying the survivors of entire civilizations. The Council's military forces were stretched to breaking point trying to evacuate populated worlds ahead of the Devourer advance. As the session finally ended, Ambassador Veltar approached the human delegation. Captain Morrison, I hope you understand that we are not being dismissive out of malice. The greatest military minds in galactic history have studied this problem. Civilizations with millions of years of scientific advancement have thrown their best weapons at these machines. We understand, Ambassador, Jake replied. But we'd still like to try. Very well. You will have full access to our tactical databases. Perhaps your species' unique perspective will prove valuable. Veltar paused. Though I fear the galaxy may not survive long enough for any solution to matter. As they made their way back to the Endeavor, Jake's team was unusually quiet. Finally, Colonel Wright spoke. Captain, those beings we just met with have been fighting wars since before humans discovered fire. If they can't stop these Devourers, what makes us think we can? Maybe we can't, Jake replied. But I noticed something interesting in those battle recordings. What? Every single weapon they used was some kind of energy beam or particle stream. Very sophisticated, very elegant, but not one kinetic projectile. Bobby Chen grinned. Captain, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? I'm thinking the galaxy's most advanced civilizations might have gotten so sophisticated they forgot about the simple solutions. Rick Stone was already accessing the tactical database on his portable unit. Captain, if we're going to try something this crazy, we're going to need a lot more than one exploration ship. Then we better call home, Jake said, and we better hope Admiral Sullivan is feeling adventurous. The emergency meeting aboard the HSS Endeavor lasted 6 hours as Jake Morrison and his team analyzed every piece of data the Council had provided. The holographic displays showed technical specifications that hurt to look at and tactical reports. that painted a picture of systematic annihilation across 17 star systems. Bobby Chen had spread engineering schematics across 3 different screens while muttering things that would have made a physicist weep. "Captain," Bobby said finally, "I think I understand why the Council's weapons aren't working." Jake looked up from his own analysis of the battle recordings. "Explain it to me like I'm a Marine." "Hey," Colonel Amy Wright protested from her position near the tactical display, "the Devourers have adaptive hull plating." Bobby continued, "It analyzes incoming energy patterns and modifies its molecular structure. To counter them, plasma hits the hull, and within minutes the hull becomes plasma-resistant. Particle beams get absorbed and converted into power for their systems." Rick Stone was studying the tactical formations the Council had used in their failed battles. "Look at this, Captain. Every engagement follows the same pattern. Long range. Energy bombardment followed by retreat when the weapons stop working. They're fighting like gentlemen. And gentlemen are losing," Jake observed. "What's your point, Rick?" "My point is that humans don't fight like gentlemen. We fight like humans." Dr. Susan Parker looked up from her medical analysis of Devourer technology. "The machines are impressive, but they're still bound by basic physics. They can adapt to energy patterns, but they can't ignore kinetic force." Jake activated the ship's long-range communications array and sent an encrypted message toward human space. The message was simple and direct in the way that military communications always were when someone was about to do something monumentally stupid. "Admiral Sullivan, this is Captain Morrison. We have a solution to the Devourer problem, but we're going to need every ship in the fleet and enough firepower to crack a moon." The response took 3 days to arrive because Admiral Kate Sullivan had to convince the Human Defense Council that humanity's entire military should be committed to a war that was happening on the other side of the galaxy. When the message finally came through, it was vintage Sullivan. "Captain Morrison, you have authorization. For Operation Sledgehammer, every available ship is being retrofitted with kinetic bombardment systems. Try not to get us all killed." Jake smiled as he read the message. Kate Sullivan had been his commanding officer 20 years ago when he was a young lieutenant learning how to blow things up in space. She understood that sometimes the best solution was the simplest one delivered with maximum force. The human industrial complex responded with the efficiency that had made humanity a spacefaring civilization in less than 4 centuries. Shipyards across 50 systems began working around the clock to retrofit military vessels with what Chief Weapons Designer Colonel Dan Murphy cheerfully called the stupidest guns we can possibly build. Murphy's design was elegantly simple in the way that human weapons technology always was. The Mjolnir-class kinetic bombardment system fired tungsten rods the size of telephone poles at 30% the speed of light. No energy signature for the Devourers to analyze. No sophisticated targeting system for them to counter. Just raw, kinetic energy delivered with the precision that came from 500 years of human warfare. "The math is beautiful in its simplicity," Murphy explained in his technical briefing to the fleet commanders. "A 10-meter tungsten rod moving at 0.3. Light speed carries the kinetic energy equivalent of a 50-megaton nuclear weapon. The Devourers can adapt their hulls to absorb energy, but they cannot adapt to having a telephone pole punch through them at relativistic speeds." Meanwhile, Marine General Linda Foster was developing boarding protocols for something the Council had never attempted. "The aliens think in terms of elegant solutions and minimal casualties," Foster explained to her battalion commanders. "We think in terms of getting the job done regardless of cost. If these machines want to board one of our ships, they're going to discover why evolution gave humans adrenaline and anger." The human approach to close-quarters combat was simple and direct. Every Marine would carry enough explosives to level a city block. Their weapons were designed on a single principle that had served humanity well throughout its violent history. If something moves and it's not human, then apply overwhelming firepower until it stops moving. Admiral Tony Martinez took command of the hastily assembled human defense fleet from the bridge of the HSS Retribution. Martinez was a career military officer who had learned his trade-fighting pirates in the outer systems where subtlety was a luxury nobody could afford. He looked at the tactical display showing 200 human warships bristling with kinetic weapons and felt something that might have been confidence. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving updates from Council intelligence. The Devourers have consumed 2 more systems while we've been preparing. Current projections show them reaching the Galactic Rim within 8 months, Martinez nodded. "Then we better make sure this works the first time. Signal all ships. We jump to the Kepler 442 system in 6 hours. The choice of Kepler 442 was strategic. Intelligence reports showed a major Devourer harvesting operation in progress, with multiple large-scale manufacturing ships converting the system's 4th planet into more machines. If the human fleet could destroy the manufacturing capability, then they might slow the enemy expansion long enough for the Council to regroup. Dr. Pete Johnson from the Weapons Research Division was aboard the Retribution to observe the first combat test of human kinetic weapons. Johnson was the kind of scientist who still got excited about nuclear explosions and thought antimatter was probably overrated. "Admiral, the beauty of our approach is its predictability," Johnson explained. As they prepared to jump, "We know exactly how much kinetic energy we're delivering, and we know exactly what that energy will do to any material structure. And if it doesn't work," Martinez asked, "then we try hitting them harder." The jump to Kepler 442 took 18 hours through hyperspace. When the human fleet emerged, they found themselves facing something that defied easy description. The Devourer harvesting fleet looked like a collection of geometric nightmares that had learned to fly. Massive spheres and cubes and shapes that hurt to look at directly were systematically dismantling the 4th planet with industrial efficiency. "Tactical analysis," Martinez ordered. 67 enemy vessels, Captain. Largest is approximately 15 kilometers in diameter. They appear to be in the process of converting planetary mass into additional manufacturing capacity. Martinez studied the enemy formation. The Devourers were spread across the system with no apparent concern for defense or tactical coordination. They had grown accustomed to dealing with enemies who attacked with energy weapons at long range and retreated when those weapons proved ineffective. "Signal all ships," Martinez commanded. "This is Admiral Martinez to all vessels. We are going to demonstrate why the galaxy should have asked for human help 300 years ago. Target the largest enemy vessel and fire everything we have." The human fleet opened fire with 200 Mjolnir-class kinetic bombardment systems simultaneously. Tungsten rods moving at 30% light speed crossed the distance to their target in seconds. The largest Devourer harvester had approximately 1/10 of a second to register the incoming projectiles before they arrived. The impact was visible from 3 star systems away. The harvester that had been immune to every weapon in the Council arsenal simply ceased to exist. Where there had been a 15-kilometer sphere of adaptive metamaterial, there was now an expanding cloud of metallic vapor and the kind of energy release that made neutron stars look dim. "Holy hell," whispered the tactical officer. "Direct hit." "Captain, target destroyed." Martinez allowed himself a small smile. "Signal the fleet. Choose your targets and fire at will. Let's show these machines why humans conquered their own planet before they figured out how to leave it." The Battle of Kepler 442 had begun, and for the first time in 8 months, something was shooting back at the Devourers with weapons they could not adapt to or counter. The age of elegant warfare was over, and the age of human solutions had arrived. The destruction of the first Devourer harvester sent shockwaves through both fleets. Admiral Tony Martinez watched his tactical display as the enemy formation began to change for the first time in 8 months of warfare. The machines that had ignored Council fleets were suddenly paying attention to the humans who had just turned their largest vessel into cosmic dust. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, The remaining Devourer vessels are breaking formation. They're moving to engage. Us directly, Martinez nodded. This was exactly what Marine General Linda Foster had predicted. The Devourers would try to adapt by closing distance and boarding human ships where their superior technology could overcome simple kinetic weapons. What they did not understand was that humans had been fighting in close quarters since before. They discovered fire. Signal Colonel Wright aboard the Endeavor. Martinez ordered, "Tell her the Marines are about to earn their pay." The Devourer response was swift and predictable. Dozens of smaller craft launched from the surviving harvester ships and accelerated toward the human fleet at speeds that made conventional pursuit impossible. Each boarding craft was the size of a city block and armed with cutting tools that could slice through starship hulls like tissue paper. "Incoming boarders," the tactical officer announced. "Estimated contact in 4 minutes." Martinez activated the fleet communications channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Martinez. Remember your training and trust your equipment. These machines are about to learn why evolution gave humans the ability to get angry. Colonel Amy Wright was aboard the HSS Endeavor coordinating the Marine response when the first Devourer boarding craft attached itself to the ship's hull. The sound of cutting tools working through meter-thick armor plating filled the corridors as Wright's Marines took their positions. Each Marine carried enough firepower to destroy a small building and had been trained to use it without hesitation. "Remember, people," Wright said over the Marine communications channel, "these are machines, not living beings. Do not hesitate and do not show mercy. Our job is to break their toys until they stop working." The Devourer cutting tools broke through the hull, plating near the main cargo bay. What emerged from the boarding craft looked like mechanical spiders, the size of automobiles, with too many legs and weapons that hummed with deadly energy. The machines moved with precise coordination as they began to secure the breached section. Wright's Marines opened fire with weapons that the Council would have considered barbarically primitive. Chemical explosives and projectile weapons filled the cargo bay with smoke and noise and the kind of violence that made civilized beings uncomfortable. The lead Devourer construct analyzed the incoming projectiles for 0.2 seconds before a rocket-propelled grenade removed its central processing unit. "Contact," Sergeant Billy Murphy reported over the comm channel. "Hostiles are down, but more are coming through the breach." The battle inside the ship became a nightmare of close quarters, combat that neither side had really prepared for. The Devourers had superior technology and adaptive capabilities, but they had been designed to fight civilizations that preferred elegant solutions and minimal casualties. Human Marines preferred maximum casualties delivered as quickly as possible. Private. Jenny Collins found herself face-to-face with a Devourer construct in a corridor barely wide enough for both of them. The machine began to analyze her weapon while she did something it had not expected. She pulled the pins on 2 fragmentation grenades and held them against the machine's central chassis while counting down from 5. "For humanity," Collins said, and released the grenades. The explosion took out a 20-meter section of corridor and 6 Devourer constructs, but it also eliminated the breach point they had been trying to defend. Wright received the damage report with the kind of grim satisfaction that came from winning ugly. Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison was leading a different kind of assault. The Council had provided detailed scans of Devourer internal layouts, and Morrison had noticed something interesting. Despite their advanced technology, the machines still followed basic engineering principles. Critical systems were located at the center of each vessel, protected by multiple layers of defensive systems. "Bobby," Morrison said to Chief Engineer Bobby Chen, "what would happen if we got a small team into the central core of one of their big ships? Depends on what we did when we got there, Captain. What if we set off a fusion warhead inside their main reactor?" Chen grinned with the expression of an engineer who had just been asked to break something expensive. That would cause what we technically call a really big explosion. Morrison's boarding party consisted of 12 Marines and enough nuclear explosives to sterilize a continent. They approached the largest remaining Devourer harvester in a modified, assault shuttle that had been designed for exactly this kind of impossible mission. The shuttle's hull was lined with reactive armor, and its engines were powerful enough to punch through a starship's shields. "Remember the plan," Morrison told his team as they approached the enemy vessel. "We get in fast, we plant the charges, and we get out faster." The shuttle hit the Devourer hull at maximum velocity and punched through 3 layers of adaptive armor before coming to rest inside what appeared to be a manufacturing bay. Morrison and his Marines found themselves surrounded by mechanical assembly lines that were producing more Devourer constructs at a rate of 1 per minute. "Plant charges on everything that looks important," Morrison ordered. "We have 10 minutes before this place figures out we don't belong here." The Marines spread through the manufacturing complex, setting fusion charges on reactor cores and assembly mechanisms. The Devourers seemed confused by intruders who were not trying to engage them in combat, but were instead running around placing small devices on critical systems. Sergeant Tom Wilson found the main reactor core in a chamber that was probably beautiful by machine standards. The reactor was a perfect sphere of crystalline metal that pulsed with energy patterns his instruments could not identify. Wilson placed his fusion charge against the reactor housing and armed the timer. "Captain," Wilson reported, "main charge is armed and ready. All teams report." Morrison called engineering charges set, manufacturing charges armed, secondary reactor wired for demolition. Morrison looked at his chronometer. They had been inside the enemy ship for 8 minutes, and he could hear the sound of Devourer constructs moving through the corridors toward their position. Time to leave, people. The trip back to their shuttle was a running battle through corridors filled with machines that were finally beginning to understand what the humans were trying to do. Morrison's Marines fought a fighting retreat using tactics that would have horrified civilized military observers. When faced with superior numbers, they used explosives. When faced with superior technology, they used more explosives. Private Carl Davis held the rearguard position with a weapon that fired miniature nuclear warheads at a rate of 6 per minute. "Captain," Davis called over the combat comm, "I can hold this position for maybe 2 more minutes." "That's all we need," Morrison replied as the shuttle engines came online. "Everyone aboard now." The shuttle launched from the Devourer harvester just as the fusion charges detonated. The explosion was visible from the other side of the solar system, as 15 kilometers of advanced alien machinery was converted into expanding plasma. Morrison watched the tactical display as the enemy vessel simply ceased to exist. "Admiral Martinez, this is Captain Morrison. Target destroyed. The big one is gone." Martinez's response was typical of human military communications. "Outstanding work, Captain. Now let's finish the job." The Battle of Kepler 442 continued for 6 more hours, as human ships systematically destroyed every Devourer vessel in the system. The machines that had been unstoppable for 8 months discovered that they had no effective counter for weapons that ignored their adaptive defenses and tactics that treated collateral damage as a feature rather than a bug. When the last enemy vessel was reduced to scrap metal, Admiral Martinez sent a message that would become famous throughout human space. "Council Command, this is Admiral Martinez. Kepler 442 system is secure. Enemy forces eliminated. Send cleanup crews." The news of the human victory at Kepler 442 spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. For the first time in 8 months of devastating losses, the Galactic Council received a battle report that did not begin with casualty figures and retreat orders. Ambassador Veltar of the Thymelian hegemony read the tactical summary 3 times before he could believe what his instruments were telling him. "They destroyed the entire Devourer fleet," Veltar said to the emergency assembly. 67 vessels, including 3 major harvester ships, eliminated in 6 hours of combat. The council chamber erupted in sounds that would have been applause if most of the species present had possessed hands. Admiral Korthak of the Zalani military stood from his position and addressed the assembly with something approaching wonder in his voice. "The humans accomplished in one battle what our combined fleets could not achieve in 8 months of warfare," Korthak admitted. Perhaps we should reconsider our tactical approaches. Admiral Kate Sullivan arrived at the Council station aboard her flagship HSS Determination with a fleet of 300 human warships that had been retrofitted for what military planners were calling Operation Galaxy Cleaner. Sullivan was a career officer who had spent 30 years learning how to break things efficiently, and she looked at the tactical displays showing devourer positions throughout the galaxy with the expression of someone who had just been handed a very interesting puzzle. Admiral Sullivan, Ambassador Veltar said during their first strategy meeting, "Your species has achieved something remarkable. We are prepared to offer humanity full membership in the Galactic Council immediately." "That's very kind, Ambassador," Sullivan replied. "But right now we have machines to kill and planets to save. We can discuss politics after we finish the job." The combined Human Council operations began within days of Sullivan's arrival. The pattern was always the same and always effective. Council forces would provide intelligence and logistics support, while human ships delivered kinetic bombardments that the devourers could not adapt to or counter. The elegant energy weapons that had failed for months were replaced by tungsten rods moving at relativistic speeds. Captain Jake Morrison found himself promoted to admiral and given command of a joint task force that included both human ships and alien vessels whose crews were eager to learn human tactics. Morrison's first lesson was simple and direct. The key to fighting these machines is to remember that they think like machines. Morrison explained to his mixed crew of humans and aliens, "They analyze patterns and develop counters. So we don't give them patterns to analyze." The joint operations were initially awkward as alien crews tried to understand human military doctrine. The Karathi had perfected warfare over 50 million years, but they had never encountered an enemy that considered orbital bombardment a reasonable opening move. The Zalani could manipulate energy with precision that bordered on art, but they struggled with weapons that were designed to be as crude and destructive as possible. Colonel Amy Wright established training programs for alien Marines who wanted to learn human boarding techniques. The classes were popular among younger alien officers who found human tactics refreshingly direct compared to the complex strategies favored by their own species. "The human approach to close combat is elegantly simple," explained Lieutenant Zarhan. Of the Timelian Guard, after completing Wright's basic training, when faced with opposition apply maximum firepower until opposition ceases. The war turned into a systematic hunt across the galaxy as human-led task forces tracked down and destroyed devourer fleets with methodical efficiency. Each battle followed the same pattern. The machines would attempt to adapt to human weapons and fail because there was nothing to adapt to. Kinetic energy was kinetic energy regardless of how sophisticated your defenses might be. Admiral Tony Martinez commanded the assault on the Galactic core, where intelligence reports indicated the original Devourer manufacturing facilities were located. The factory ships had been dormant for millions of years, but recent activity suggested they were beginning to wake up in response to their children's expansion across the galaxy. "If we can destroy the source, then we end this war permanently," Martinez explained to his fleet commanders. "No more manufacturing means no more machines." The journey to the galactic core took 2 months through hyperspace and brought the combined human-alien fleet face-to-face with something that defied easy description. The Devourer factory ships were structures the size of small moons with manufacturing capabilities that could produce entire fleets within days. They had been sleeping in the radiation-soaked environment near the galaxy's central black hole for longer than most species could comprehend. Admiral, his tactical officer, reported, "I'm reading energy signatures consistent with major industrial activity. The factory ships are definitely active." Martinez studied the tactical display showing 12 massive structures surrounded by defensive platforms that hummed with power levels his instruments could barely measure. The Council's most optimistic projections had suggested this would be impossible to assault directly. "Signal all ships," Martinez commanded. "This is what we came here to do. Target the largest factory ship and fire everything we have." The combined fleet opened fire with every kinetic weapon they could bring to bear. Thousands of tungsten rods moving at 30% light speed crossed the distance to their targets in minutes. The factory ships that had survived the rise and fall of galactic civilizations discovered that they were not immune to having telephone poles punch through them at relativistic speeds. The first factory ship died in an explosion that was visible from the other side of the galaxy. The massive structure simply came apart as kinetic energy overwhelmed its structural integrity and converted millions of years of accumulated technology into expanding debris. Direct hit, the tactical officer announced. Primary target destroyed. Choose your targets and continue firing. Martinez ordered, "We finish this today." The Battle of the Galactic Core lasted 18 hours and ended with the complete destruction of every Devourer manufacturing facility in the galaxy. When the last factory ship was reduced to scrap metal, Martinez sent the message that officially ended the war. Council Command. This is Admiral Martinez. All primary targets destroyed. The galaxy is secure. The aftermath of the Devourer War reshaped galactic politics in ways that would have been impossible to imagine before humanity demonstrated the effectiveness of simple violence applied with overwhelming force. The Galactic Council formally invited humanity to join as a full member with special advisory status on military matters. "Your species has taught us something important," Ambassador Veltar admitted during the formal ceremony. "Sometimes the most sophisticated problem requires the simplest solution." Admiral Sullivan accepted humanity's new role with characteristic directness. "We're honored to join the Council Ambassador. Just remember that when the next crisis comes and you need something broken permanently, you know who to call." Years later, when new threats emerged from beyond the galactic rim, the Council's response was swift and unanimous. The first message sent was always the same and always effective. "Contact the humans immediately and tell them to bring the big guns." Captain Jake Morrison retired with the rank of Fleet Admiral and spent his remaining years teaching young officers the most important lesson humanity had learned about galactic warfare. When someone asks for help, you help them. When someone threatens what you care about, you hit them so hard they never get back up. And when the galaxy cries for help, you answer with firepower, because sometimes violence really is the answer. The galaxy had learned to respect human solutions, and humanity had learned that their particular brand of controlled aggression was not a flaw to be ashamed of, but a tool to be used wisely. The universe was a dangerous place, but it was a little bit safer, because somewhere in human space, there were always ships ready to demonstrate why evolution had equipped humans with anger and the intelligence to use it effectively.